What does it mean to be a man in today's world? The answers aren't as clear as they once were. Society sends mixed signals telling you to be strong but sensitive, assertive but never aggressive, ambitious but always humble. It's enough to make anyone feel untethered, caught between outdated stereotypes and a culture that often views traditional masculinity as something to apologize for. But what if there was a way to cut through the noise, a philosophy that doesn't weaken you but sharpens you, one that's been tested for over 2,000 years in the fires of war, politics, and everyday struggle? That's where Stoicism comes in. This isn't about suppressing emotions or putting on a stoic mask. Real Stoicism is about mastering yourself, your reactions, your discipline, your purpose, so you can lead with unshakable strength, whether you're facing a personal setback, a professional challenge, or the quiet chaos of modern life. Think about the last time stress knocked you off balance. Maybe it was a high-pressure moment at work, a conflict in your relationships, or just the weight of expectations piling up. Now imagine facing those moments with the calm clarity of a Roman emperor staring down an invading army. That's the power of these 20 Stoic skills. They turn daily battles into opportunities for growth. From controlling what you can and releasing what you can't to building resilience that turns obstacles into fuel, Stoicism doesn't just help you survive. It helps you thrive, and the best part, these aren't abstract ideas. They're practical tools honed by warriors, leaders, and thinkers from Marcus Aurelius to modern-day CEOs. This isn't about becoming emotionless, it's about becoming unstoppable, the kind of man who doesn't crumble under pressure but rises because of it, the kind who leads not with brute force but with integrity, who faces uncertainty with focus instead of fear. Over the next 20 skills, we'll break down exactly how to build that unshakable core, starting with the mindset shifts that reframe every challenge, and ending with the habits that lock in lifelong discipline. Whether you're rebuilding from a low point or leveling up to your highest potential, these principles don't just change how you think, they change how you live. So if you're ready to stop reacting to the world and start commanding it, let's begin. The first and most essential skill of Stoic masculinity is emotional mastery. Not the denial of feelings, but the ability to meet them with unwavering clarity. Picture this: you're stuck in traffic, late for a meeting, and someone cuts you off. Your pulse spikes, your grip tightens on the wheel. That's the primal reaction. But Stoicism teaches you to insert a single, powerful pause between stimulus and response. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who ruled Rome through wars and plagues, wrote in his private journals about wrestling with frustration and exhaustion. Yet instead of lashing out, he trained himself to ask, is this anger serving me? Is it changing what's outside my control? That's the core of emotional mastery, observing the storm without letting it steer the ship. Modern life bombards us with triggers: disrespect at work, conflicts at home, the endless noise of social media. The Stoic response: negative visualization, a technique as jarring as it is effective. Close your eyes and vividly imagine losing what you cherish most: your health, your career, your relationships. It sounds morbid, but by rehearsing adversity, you drain fear of its power. Seneca, another Stoic titan, practiced this daily. When his enemies eventually exiled him to a barren island, he didn't crumble. He'd already lived through it in his mind. Today, this could mean mentally preparing for a job loss before it happens, or visualizing a difficult conversation without flinching. You're not borrowing trouble, you're immunizing yourself against panic. Then there's the dichotomy of control, the Stoic compass for emotional resilience. Split every challenge into two categories: what you control, your effort, your integrity, your focus, and what you don't, other people's opinions, traffic jams, market crashes. When your boss dismisses your idea or a date ghosts you, the frustration comes from conflating the two. Epictetus, born a slave and crippled by his master, built his philosophy on this truth: we suffer not from events but from our judgments about them. That's why Stoics journal, not to vent but to dissect their reactions like a surgeon. Next time anger flares, write it down. Ask, did this person truly wrong me, or did my expectations wrong me? The answer will shock you. This isn't about becoming a robot, it's about reclaiming agency. Ancient warriors used these tools to stare down death. Today, they help you navigate a toxic work call or soothe a child's tantrum without losing your center. Emotional mastery isn't the absence of fire, it's the ability to harness it, because real strength isn't never feeling rage, it's choosing not to let rage decide who you are. Discipline isn't about punishment, it's about liberation. That's the Stoic paradox at the heart of skill number 2. While modern culture equates freedom with endless choice and instant gratification, the Stoics flip the script. True freedom comes from owning your actions, not being owned by your impulses. Epictetus, the former slave who became one of history's most influential thinkers, put it bluntly, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Imagine a lion tamer controlling a beast 10 times his size. That's the power of discipline. Not to cage your desires, but to direct them with precision. We live in an age of engineered distraction. Notifications, fast food, bingeable content everywhere you turn. Something's fighting for your attention, your cravings, your weakest moments. The Stoics fought back with deliberate discomfort. They practiced voluntary hardship, sleeping on the floor, walking barefoot in winter, fasting for days. Not because suffering was virtuous, but because it revealed their breaking points before life forced them to face those limits. Take cold showers, a modern version of this ancient tool. That first icy blast triggers every instinct to escape, but staying under the water teaches something deeper. You can tolerate far more than your mind claims. It's not about the cold, it's about rewriting your relationship with discomfort. This isn't masochism, it's training. Just as a boxer spars to prepare for a real fight, Stoics used self-denial to armor themselves against life's unpredictability. Seneca, one of Rome's wealthiest men, regularly ate nothing but stale bread and slept in a cramped hut, not to punish his success, but to ensure it couldn't soften him. Poverty, he wrote, is a test of who can conquer, not who can inherit. Today, that might mean deleting social media for a week to confront your fear of missing out, or turning down a third drink when no one's watching. Small acts of refusal strengthen the muscle of self-command. Discipline creates margin, the space between wanting and choosing. Think of it like a financial budget. If you spend all your willpower by midday scrolling and snacking, you'll have nothing left when real challenges arise. The Stoics called this prosouch, attention to your inner balance sheet. Marcus Aurelius kept a journal not to record his achievements but to audit his lapses. When you wake up in the morning, he reminded himself, tell yourself, the people I meet today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant. By anticipating friction, he wasn't being cynical, he was preserving his energy for what mattered. The modern world confuses convenience for progress. We outsource cooking to meal kits, focus to stimulants, even relationships to algorithms. But Stoic discipline asks, what are you sacrificing for that convenience? Every time you bypass struggle, you surrender agency. Epictetus warned his students, if you seek truth, be prepared to endure. That truth could be physical, like pushing through one more rep when your muscles scream. Or emotional, like having the hard conversation instead of dodging it. Discipline isn't the enemy of joy, it's the architect, because the man who controls his impulses doesn't avoid pleasure, he earns it. Here's the real secret: discipline compounds. Start by mastering your mornings, rising at the same time without bargaining. Then extend that control to your diet, your work ethic, your reactions. Like a blacksmith tempering steel, each act of denial makes you more resilient. The Stoics didn't worship suffering, they revered the strength it forged. Because when you've stood in the cold by choice, the storms of life feel different. You stop seeing obstacles as threats and start recognizing them as the training ground for the man you're becoming. Resilience isn't something you're born with, it's something you forge in the fire of adversity. And no one understood this better than the Stoics. Take Cato the Younger, the Roman senator who stood alone against Julius Caesar's tyranny. When his allies betrayed him, when his cause was lost, and even when his own son begged him to surrender, Cato's response was to sharpen his sword and reread Plato's Phaedo, a dialogue on the immortality of the soul, before taking his own life on his terms. Extreme, absolutely, but here's the lesson. Cato wasn't just resisting Caesar. He was proving to himself that no external force could break his inner resolve. His defiance wasn't about winning, it was about demonstrating that adversity, even in its cruelest form, couldn't dictate his character. That's the essence of the Stoic maxim, the obstacle is the way. What looks like a roadblock is actually the path. Seneca, exiled to Corsica by the Emperor Claudius, didn't waste time lamenting his fate. He turned barren isolation into a creative crucible, writing some of his most profound works there. Later, when Nero, the very student he'd mentored, ordered his suicide, Seneca met the blade with chilling calm, comforting his weeping friends by asking, "Where are the maxims of philosophy?" Where the learning we've meditated on for so many years, his final act was teaching, showing that even death could be faced with agency. So how do you apply this to modern setbacks? Start by reframing rejection. A job loss isn't just a failure, it's feedback. The Stoics practiced premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Imagine the worst-case scenario, not to dwell on it, but to strip it of its power. What if you got fired tomorrow? Mentally walk through your response, updating your resume, reaching out to your network, tightening your budget. By rehearsing disaster, you transform fear into preparation. Next, adopt the view from above, a Stoic exercise where you zoom out on your problems. Picture yourself a year from now, looking back at this moment. Will this rejection still sting, or will it be the pivot that led to something better? When the entrepreneur Tim Ferriss was contemplating suicide during a business meltdown, he asked himself, "If I avoid this, what might I miss in 5 years?" That question saved his life. Finally, embrace amor fati, love of fate. Nietzsche, who borrowed this Stoic concept, called it the formula for greatness, not just enduring what happens, but embracing it as necessary. When a relationship ends or a deal falls through, ask, how does this serve me? Maybe it's freeing you for a better opportunity. Maybe it's toughening you for bigger battles. The Stoics didn't worship suffering, they revered the strength it revealed, because here's the truth, resilience isn't about bouncing back, it's about growing through. A sword isn't tempered by gentle heat, it's hammered and quenched until it becomes unbreakable. Your setbacks aren't interruptions to your story, they're the raw material of it. So when life hands you a blade, ask not why it cuts you, but how you'll use it to carve your way forward. Purposeful action separates the man who drifts through life from the man who commands it, and the Stoics had a word for this kind of excellence, arete. But this isn't about racking up achievements or grinding for clout. Arete means acting with such alignment to your values that your very movements become a statement of character. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who turned philosophy into a manual for daily living, put it bluntly, work that degrades the soul, no matter how profitable, is not work fit for a man. Imagine two bricklayers. One stacks bricks mindlessly, counting hours until payday. The other sees each stone as part of a cathedral he'll never live to see. Both are laboring, but only one is practicing arete. Modern hustle culture glorifies busyness as virtue, side gigs, hustle porn, the cult of exhaustion. But Stoicism asks a devastating question. What is all this motion for? Musonius taught that labor, physical or mental, only becomes meaningful when it serves something greater than the self. A banker chasing bonuses isn't practicing arete. A banker who uses his skills to stabilize his community's economy is. The difference isn't the action, it's the why behind it. This is why Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one. Excellence isn't debated, it's lived brick by brick." Here's how to apply this today. First, audit your efforts. List every major task from your past week. Now ask, which of these aligned with my deepest values? Which merely filled time or padded my ego? The Stoics didn't reject ambition, they rejected aimlessness. A warrior trains not just to fight, but to defend what he loves. Second, redefine productivity. The ancient Greeks measured a man's worth by his dikaios, his justice in action. Are you scrolling for leverage or for distraction? Building a legacy or a persona, even rest becomes purposeful when it's deliberate. Seneca took regular retreats not to escape his duties but to return to them sharper. Musonius took this further, arguing that manual labor, farming, blacksmithing, carpentry was essential to philosophical training. Why? Because it grounds action in tangible reality. A modern equivalent might be fixing a leaky faucet instead of calling a handyman, or cooking a meal from scratch instead of tapping an app. When your hands shape the world directly, you're reminded excellence isn't abstract. It's in the sweat, the focus, the refusal to cut corners. But here's the twist: Arete demands sacrifice. You can't chase prestige and integrity. You can't hoard comfort and growth. When Musonius was exiled to a barren island, he didn't languish, he planted gardens and taught philosophy to fishermen. His enemies expected him to beg for mercy. Instead, he turned exile into a masterclass in living deliberately. That's the ultimate test. If stripped of your status, your wealth, even your freedom, would your actions still mean something? Purposeful action isn't about grand gestures. It's about the 1,000 small choices that echo your character. A Stoic doesn't ask, "What can I get away with?" He asks, "What would the man I aspire to be do right now?" Whether it's shutting down gossip at the office or choosing the harder but honorable path in a negotiation, Arete shines in the moments no one applauds. Because excellence isn't a performance. It's the quiet certainty that your hands are building something that lasts. Voluntary discomfort sounds like a contradiction. Why would anyone choose hardship when comfort is just a tap away? But the Stoics understood something modern men often forget. Ease weakens while controlled struggle fortifies. Take the Spartan agoge, the brutal training regime that turned boys into warriors by exposing them to hunger, cold, and exhaustion. The goal wasn't cruelty, it was inoculation. By facing adversity on their own terms, they ensured life couldn't ambush them with anything worse. Seneca put it bluntly, fate leads the willing, drags the unwilling. Today, that might mean swapping your ergonomic office chair for an hour of seated meditation on hardwood, or trading a lazy Sunday for a grueling hike. Pain chosen is pain conquered. Consider the modern parallel: digital detoxes. Your ancestors didn't battle algorithms designed to hijack dopamine receptors, but you do. When you voluntarily lock your phone in a drawer for 48 hours, you're not just resisting distraction, you're rewiring your brain's tolerance for stillness. The first few hours feel like withdrawal because they are. But by enduring that itch, you reclaim something priceless: the ability to focus without artificial stimulation. Marcus Aurelius warned against being addicted to busyness, and today's attention economy proves how prophetic that was. Voluntary discomfort isn't about rejecting technology, it's about refusing to let it dictate your limits. Fitness culture reveals another layer. Most men chase PRs or aesthetics, but Stoic training targets something deeper: the moment your mind begs you to quit. When you hold a plank until your core trembles, you're not just building muscle, you're rehearsing for life's critical junctures. Navy SEAL endure hell week, not because war demands non-stop push-ups, but because breaking points reveal character. Epictetus, who endured slavery and a crippling leg injury, wrote, "Difficulty shows what men are." That's why Stoics fasted not to punish their bodies, but to master the voice that whispers just one bite. Modernize this with a 24-hour water fast. The hunger pangs teach you that cravings are negotiable, not commands. Here's the key distinction: voluntary discomfort isn't self-punishment. It's strategic self-ownership. The billionaire who flies coach to stay grounded practices the same principle as the college student budgeting on rice and beans. Both are proving that comfort won't enslave them. Musonius Rufus forced his students to dig ditches in the sun, not because philosophy requires calluses, but because intellectual wisdom means nothing without the grit to endure real-world friction. Practical application: start small. Take cold showers, not a quick in and out, but 60 seconds underwater so cold it steals your breath. Notice how your mind races to justify escape, then override it. Later, escalate. Sleep without a pillow, walk 5 miles instead of driving, have the awkward conversation you've been avoiding. Each act is a vote for resilience over retreat. The Stoics didn't seek suffering, they sought sovereignty, because the man who's willingly faced discomfort never fears it, and in a world addicted to shortcuts, that makes him unstoppable. Words carry weight, especially for a man who understands their power. Stoic communication isn't about eloquence or dominating conversations. It's about precision, honesty, and the discipline to wield language like a scalpel, not a club. Seneca, the philosopher who tutored Nero, spent years writing letters to his friend Lucilius that dissected this very idea. Speech is the mirror of the soul, he warned. A man's character is disclosed by how he talks and how he listens. Think of the last time gossip slipped into your conversation. Maybe it felt harmless, a casual remark about a co-worker's mistake or a friend's questionable choice. But Stoics saw gossip as poison disguised as small talk. Every time you partake, you're trading integrity for fleeting social bonds. Seneca's remedy. Silence is a lesson learned from the many sufferings of life. Before speaking, ask, is this necessary? Is it true? Is it kind? If any answer falters, your silence becomes an act of strength. But communication isn't just about words. Modern science confirms what the Stoics intuited. Your body speaks before your mouth does. Marcus Aurelius practiced prosouch, continuous attention to his presence, whether addressing the Senate or his own children. A slouched posture, darting eyes, or fidgeting hands undercut even the most profound message. Today, this translates to mastering nonverbal cues. Eye contact isn't about intimidation. It's respect crystallized into a glance. A firm handshake doesn't prove dominance, it signals reliability. The Stoics trained like actors, not to fake authenticity, but to align their exterior with their principles. Epictetus, despite his limp from years in chains, stood with such deliberate composure that students remarked he seemed carved from stone. His presence was a silent rebuke to frivolity. Listening, though, is where most men fail. Modern dialogue is often a duel of interruptions, each person rehearsing their reply instead of absorbing the other's words. The Stoic alternative: active stillness. Zeno, founder of Stoicism, taught that we're given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. When a colleague vents or a partner shares fears, resist the urge to fix or deflect. Channel Seneca's advice: hear as you'd want to be heard, with patience, without judgment. This isn't passive, it's an act of deliberate focus, stripping away distractions to truly understand. Apply this today. In your next conversation, notice the gap between hearing and listening. When someone speaks, pause for 2 full seconds before responding, not to craft a clever comeback, but to let their words resonate. Watch their gestures. Often, the tightness in a shoulder or the tremor in a voice reveals more than their sentences. And when gossip arises, redirect with a question: what's driving this story? You'll either elevate the discussion or expose its emptiness. The Stoics didn't prize silence as cowardice, but as control. A man who speaks sparingly makes his words matter. A man who listens deeply commands respect without demanding it, because true communication isn't about being heard, it's about being understood. And in a world drowning in noise, that's the rarest skill of all. True leadership doesn't demand obedience, it earns respect through action. Few embodied this better than Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king who ruled Rome through 2 decades of plague, war, and political chaos. While lesser men hoarded power, he slept on army cots beside his soldiers during the Marcomannic Wars, tended to plague victims with his own hands, and wrote in his private journal reminders like what's bad for the hive is bad for the bee. Here was an emperor who saw leadership not as privilege, but as responsibility, a sharp contrast to today's corner office tyrants who confuse authority with intimidation. Modern workplaces often reward the wrong traits: the boss who takes credit but dodges blame, the manager who rules through fear rather than mentorship. These aren't leaders. They're relics of a broken system. The Stoics measured leadership by one standard: service. When the Antonine Plague killed thousands daily, Marcus didn't retreat to his palace. He emptied the imperial treasury to fund burials, drafted laws to protect orphans, and turned his private estates into hospitals. His actions whispered what toxic workplaces shout over: you exist for your people, not the other way around. This isn't ancient history, it's a blueprint. Imagine a CEO who spends a shift answering customer service calls to understand frontline struggles, or a coach who runs the same brutal drills he demands of his team. Humility in leadership isn't weakness, it's intelligence. Marcus studied philosophy not to sound sophisticated, but to stay grounded. His meditations weren't written for publication. They were ruthless self-audits, lines like "it's ridiculous not to flee from your own wickedness, which is possible, yet attempt to flee from another's, which isn't." A modern equivalent: the executive who posts anonymous feedback surveys, then actually adjusts their behavior based on the results. But service isn't soft. When Germanic tribes crossed the Danube, Marcus didn't delegate the danger. He led legions personally, enduring freezing winters in enemy territory. Yet even in war, he forbade excessive force, negotiated fair treaties, and rebuilt conquered lands. Compare that to today's cutthroat corporate raids, where layoffs are celebrated as efficiency and empathy is dismissed as naivety. The Stoic leader knows strength isn't demonstrated by how many you dominate, but by how many you develop. So how do you practice this today? Start by redefining success. Instead of asking how many people report to me, ask how many have I helped rise. Next, embrace radical accountability. When your team fails, claim the failure publicly, then analyze it privately. Marcus wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." In a workplace poisoned by blame shifting, owning mistakes becomes revolutionary. Finally, serve the unseen. The janitor's name you bother to learn, the intern's idea you amplify. These are the tests of character no title can override. Leadership through service doesn't mean sacrificing authority. It means legitimizing it. The soldier follows the general who eats last. The crew trusts the captain who steers through the storm. Marcus's reign proves power used wisely compounds, power hoarded corrupts, because the mark of a real leader isn't who bows to him, but who stands taller because of him. Every athlete knows the paradox: the harder you cling to victory, the more it slips through your fingers. Picture a basketball player at the free throw line with 2 seconds left, game tied. If he fixates on the crowd, the trophy, or the humiliation of missing, his hands betray him. But if he narrows his world to the texture of the ball, the bend of his knees, the rhythm of his breath, that's when muscle memory takes over. The Stoics called this amor fati, the art of loving whatever outcome fate delivers, not because you're indifferent, but because you've poured everything into the effort itself. Take Michael Jordan's infamous flu game in the 1997 NBA Finals. Feverish, dehydrated, and barely able to stand, he scored 38 points to secure a crucial win. But here's what most miss: Jordan didn't play to prove his toughness or guarantee a championship. He played because showing up was his duty to the craft. In his own words, "I've failed over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed." The shots he missed, the losses he endured, they weren't failures to him, just feedback. That's Amor Fati in action, treating outcomes as data, not judgments. Entrepreneurs face the same test. Imagine two startup founders. One obsesses over valuation, press coverage, and exit strategies. The other focuses solely on solving real problems for real people, measuring success by product iteration and customer impact. When the market crashes or investors pull out, which one adapts? The Stoic founder pivots without panic because their worth wasn't tied to the outcome. Like Epictetus, who reminded his students, circumstances don't make the man, they reveal him. This isn't passive acceptance, it's ruthless prioritization. A marathon runner doesn't control the weather or competitors, but they can regulate their pace, hydration, and mindset. Similarly, a Stoic separates the process, their preparation, ethics, focus from the prized titles, profits, applause. When Marcus Aurelius faced revolts and plagues, he journaled, "The impediment to action advances action." What stands in the way becomes the way. Translation: obstacles aren't detours, they're part of the route. Practical application: start with small stakes. Next time you pitch an idea or ask for a date, define success as delivering your best effort, not securing a yes. Track your input hours studied, skills honed separately from output grades, promotions. And when outcomes disappoint, ask the Stoic double question: did I control my actions with integrity? Then why mourn what wasn't mine to decide? That shift doesn't just reduce anxiety, it unleashes potential. Because when you stop fearing loss, you start risking greatness. Time slips through our fingers not because it's scarce, but because we squander it on distractions dressed as necessities. Seneca saw this 2,000 years ago when he wrote on the shortness of life, a blistering indictment of how men fritter away their most precious resource. It's not that we have a short time to live, he argued, but that we waste much of it. Think about your last week, how many hours vanished into social media scrolling, half-hearted conversations, or tasks that left no mark on your life. The Stoic remedy isn't more hustle, it's ruthless prioritization. Seneca divided time into two categories: chronos, clock time, and kairos, moments that matter. The man who masters his days doesn't chase productivity hacks, he eliminates everything that doesn't align with his purpose. Start with the Stoic practice of Memento Mori, remembering death. Modern culture treats mortality like a taboo, but Stoics wielded it as a scalpel to cut through triviality. Picture this: at Roman banquets, servants would whisper respice post te, hominum tes memento, look behind you, remember you are mortal, into the ears of revelers. Not to kill joy, but to sharpen it. When you internalize that your days are numbered, someday becomes today. A friend once told me he avoided writing his novel for years until a cancer scare forced him to confront his excuses. He finished the manuscript in 3 months. Death isn't morbid, it's the ultimate accountability partner. Then there's the art of refusal. Seneca observed that even powerful men became slaves to others' demands, writing, "No person hands out their money to passers-by, yet to how many do we hand out our lives?" The modern equivalent, saying yes to meetings that could be emails, side projects that drain your focus, or social obligations out of guilt. Time blocking isn't just a calendar trick, it's a declaration of sovereignty. Marcus Aurelius reserved his mornings for philosophy and journaling before facing the chaos of empire. Translate this today: guard your first 2 hours like a sacred ritual. No emails, no news, just deep work on what moves the needle. But Stoic time management goes deeper than tactics. It's about auditing your attention like a financial advisor scrutinizes expenses. Seneca urged his friend Lucilius to track his hours as meticulously as a merchant tracks inventory. Hold every hour in your grasp, he wrote. Lay hold of today's task and you won't depend on tomorrow's. Try this experiment for 3 days. Log every activity in 15-minute increments. You'll discover the real currency thieves. The 20 minutes lost to indecision in the grocery aisle, the hour drained by a coworker's complaining. Awareness precedes control, the final frontier, leveraging leisure. Romans didn't idolize busyness as virtue, they prized otium, productive leisure, over negotium, mindless labor. Seneca spent evenings studying astronomy and composing tragedies. Cotto read philosophy between battles. Contrast that with today's downtime of binge-watching and doom-scrolling. Leisure isn't laziness, it's the space where creativity and resilience are replenished. A CEO client of mine schedules thinking hikes every Friday where he bans phones and lets solutions surface away from screens. His biggest breakthroughs strike mid-trail, proving Seneca right. Sometimes even to live is an act of courage. Time management, like a Stoic, doesn't mean cramming more in. It means stripping away everything that isn't living. When you stop conflating motion with progress, a paradox emerges. The more you honor time's limits, the more it expands, because the man who knows his days are finite doesn't rush. He chooses. Wealth whispers dangerous lies, that security lies in possessions, that status is measured by what you own, that happiness can be bought. Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who lived like a peasant despite tutoring emperors, sliced through these illusions with brutal clarity. Luxury makes a man weaker, not richer. He watched Rome's elite gorge themselves on exotic foods while their minds grew sluggish, their character flabby. His solution, frugality as training. Not poverty for its own sake, but voluntary restraint to prove that your peace isn't for sale. When he forced his students to eat simple barley bread and sleep on hard beds, he wasn't punishing them. He was immunizing them against the real disease, believing you need more to be enough. Modern consumerism is just ancient Rome with better marketing. The average person sees over 5,000 ads a day, each engineered to trigger one response: you're lacking. That itch for the latest phone, the gym shoes promising status, the luxury car lease masquerading as an investment. It's all the same trap Seneca warned about. Poverty is wanting more, not having less. The Stoic alternative: audit your spending like a philosopher. For 1 month, track every dollar, then categorize. Needs: food, shelter, health, tools, skills, education, assets, and bribes to your ego. Designer labels, impulse buys. You'll spot the pattern. Most necessities are just comfort in disguise, but frugality isn't deprivation, it's precision. Consider Warren Buffett, who still lives in the same Omaha house he bought in 1958 for $31,000. Or Patagonia founder Yvon Chouinard, who wears thrift store flannel while building a billion-dollar brand. These men aren't cheap, they're channeling Musonius' lesson. Money is fuel for purpose, not validation. Apply this by implementing the 24-hour rule. For any non-essential purchase, wait a full day. If the desire fades, it was never about the object, it was about the itch. The deeper hack: make spending painful. Ancient Stoics carried their coins in small leather pouches, forcing them to physically feel each expenditure. Modern equivalent: switch to cash for discretionary spending. When you hand over 520s for sneakers instead of tapping plastic, the transaction stings as it should. Better yet, adopt reverse budgeting. Auto-save 50% of your income first, then live on what remains. This flips the script from "how much can I spend?" to "how little do I need?" Consumerism preys on two weaknesses: boredom and insecurity. The Stoics tackled both head-on. To cure boredom, they prescribed productive discomfort, learning a language, mastering push-ups, volunteering. Harder than shopping, absolutely. More satisfying beyond measure. For insecurity, Marcus Aurelius offered this mantra: you don't need much to live a happy life. Test it. Wear the same 7 outfits on rotation. Cook simple meals from scratch. Notice how your mind rebels, then adapts. Luxury's greatest lie is convincing us we're missing out. The truth: freedom grows in the space between your paycheck and your desires. Because here's the secret Stoics knew: wealth isn't measured in banks, but in uninterrupted mornings, in the ability to walk away from toxic deals, in the quiet confidence that you can't be bought. The man who masters financial temperance doesn't look poor, he looks untouchable. physical vigor isn't just about aesthetics, it's the foundation of an unshakable mind. The Stoics didn't separate gym sessions from philosophy. They saw sweat as the proving ground for resilience. Take the farmer's carry, an exercise so simple it feels primal. Grab heavy weights and walk. No fancy machines, no mirrors, just raw effort. Now imagine Epictetus, the once crippled slave, watching modern men hunch over screens for hours, their muscles atrophying along with their willpower. He'd ask, how can you expect to bear life's burdens if you can't even carry your own weight? Science backs this. A 2019 Harvard study found that just 30 minutes of daily strength training reduces depression symptoms as effectively as medication. The connection isn't coincidental. When your grip fails during a deadlift, you face the same choice as when adversity strikes: collapse or recalibrate and push harder. Sedentary living isn't just a health crisis, it's a moral one. Ancient Stoics like Cleans, who funded his philosophy studies by hauling water at night, understood something we've forgotten: movement sharpens judgment. Modern research shows that sitting for more than 8 hours daily shrinks the brain's memory centers, while aerobic exercise spawns new neurons. Marcus Aurelius didn't have MRI scans, but he knew this intuitively when he wrote, "Your mind will take the shape of what you frequently hold in thought, just as your body takes the shape of what you repeatedly do." Scroll through Instagram for 3 hours and your mind becomes scattered. Train with kettlebells for 30 minutes and it becomes focused. The difference isn't just physical, it's neurological. But Stoic training wasn't about gyms. It was about functional strength forged through necessity. Roman soldiers marched 20 miles in full armor before digging trenches. Musonius Rufus made his students plow fields, not for crops but for character. Modernize this, swap the elevator for stairs, commute by bike instead of Uber, or turn meetings into walking discussions. These aren't fitness hacks, they're rebellions against a culture that equates convenience with progress. When you choose exertion over ease, you're not just building muscle. You're rehearsing for life's unpredictable battles. Here's the paradox: physical struggle simplifies mental chaos. Navy SEAL endure hell week, not because war demands endless push-ups, but because exhaustion reveals truth. Under duress, pretense collapses. The Stoic version, cold showers. That initial shock strips away rationalizations, forcing you to confront your relationship with discomfort. A 2022 University of Tokyo study found that participants who practiced cold exposure for 2 weeks reported 30% higher stress tolerance. The mechanism is ancient. Controlled hardship inoculates against uncontrolled suffering. The stakes are higher than six-pack abs. A body weakened by lethargy becomes a mind weakened by excuses. Seneca, who battled chronic illness, still swam in freezing Tiber winters. The body should be treated more rigorously, he wrote, so it may not be disobedient to the mind. Today, that might mean holding a plank until your abs scream, not to flaunt on Instagram, but to prove to yourself that pain isn't a stop sign, it's a checkpoint. Because when you've stood firm against the burn in your quads, the sting of rejection or failure feels less like a threat and more like another rep in the workout of life. This isn't about becoming a Spartan, it's about reclaiming agency. Every time you choose action over inertia, you're voting for vitality over decay. The Stoics didn't worship pain, they revered the vitality it preserved. So ask yourself, is your physical routine preparing you to flee from life's challenges or to meet them with grounded strength? The answer lies not in your philosophy books, but in your ability to carry the weight literally when it matters most. Grace under pressure isn't about suppressing fear, it's about acting with clarity despite it. Few embodied this better than James Stockdale, the Navy pilot whose A-4 Skyhawk was shot down over Vietnam in 1965. Parachuting into enemy territory with a broken leg, he knew his survival hinged not on luck, but on the Stoic principles he'd studied for years. For 7.5 years in the Hanoi Hilton, stripped of everything, light, medical care, even his name, Stockdale transformed his cell into a classroom. He taught fellow POWs Epictetus's maxim, "We cannot choose our circumstances, but we can always choose our response." When guards tortured him for refusing to confess war crimes, he whispered to himself, "They can break my bones, but they can't break my will." His captors wanted him broken. He chose to make his suffering a masterclass in resilience. Stockdale's ordeal wasn't unique to war. Modern crises just wear different disguises. Imagine you're onstage delivering a keynote when the projector fails. Sweat trickles down your back as 400 faces stare, waiting. The amateur panics, apologizes, rushes through his notes. The Stoic, he pauses, smiles, and says, "Well, this proves my first point: technology is unreliable, but human adaptability isn't." The crowd relaxes. He's turned a glitch into a demonstration of poise. That pivot isn't luck, it's rehearsal. Like Stockdale visualizing torture sessions in advance, you can prep for professional disasters. Role play the worst. Your mic cuts out mid-pitch, your slides corrupt, your mind blanks. Now script your comeback. Looks like we're going analog today, let's get creative. By premeditating chaos, you strip it of its power to hijack your composure. Smaller fires test Stoic calm daily. Your toddler spills juice on your laptop an hour before a deadline. Road rage flares when someone swerves into your lane. These aren't life or death, but they reveal character. Cicero, the Roman statesman, faced assassination threats with the same steadiness he brought to dinner debates. His secret: nothing is miserable unless you think it so. Modernize this. When chaos strikes, ask Stockdale's anchoring question, "What's my next right move?" Not "Why is this happening to me?" The juice spill isn't personal, it's physics. The reckless driver isn't targeting you, he's oblivious. Redirect your energy to solutions, not blame. Wipe the keyboard, change lanes. The moment you stop protesting reality and start navigating it, you've reclaimed control, the highest test of grace under pressure. When others expect you to crumble, Seneca, falsely accused of treason by Nero, received his death sentence with eerie calm. As soldiers escorted him home, he comforted his weeping wife by reciting philosophy. Even as blood dripped from his slit veins, he dictated letters, his final act a lesson in agency. Today's versions are quieter but no less profound. The executive who takes responsibility for a team failure without flinching, the athlete who praises opponents after a brutal loss. These aren't acts of denial, they're demonstrations of a core Stoic truth. Dignity isn't the absence of struggle, but the integrity you bring to it. Pressure doesn't build character, it reveals it. Stockdale's cells, Seneca's veins, your boardroom blunders, all are mirrors reflecting who you've trained to be. The Stoics didn't wait for crisis to practice calm. They drilled it in peace so war couldn't break them. Start small. Next time your Wi-Fi drops during a Zoom call, laugh instead of curse. When criticism stings, breathe before rebutting. These aren't just reactions, they're rehearsals for the day life demands everything you've got. Because the man who masters grace under pressure doesn't just survive storms, he learns to dance in the rain. Solitude scares most men, not the temporary kind like waiting in a parked car, but the deep, deliberate kind where you're left alone with your thoughts. Seneca called this retreating into yourself, and he didn't mean zoning out on a couch. He prescribed solitude as surgery, a sterile, bright-lit room where you dissect your choices without anesthesia. Picture a CEO who books a hotel room every quarter with nothing but a notebook. No agenda, no distractions, just him and the unvarnished truth about his leadership. That's Stoic solitude, not escapism but confrontation. Start with Seneca's evening audit. Before bed, he'd ask 3 questions. Where did I stray from my principles today? Where did I hold firm? What will I improve tomorrow? Modernize this with a notes app or leather journal. The medium doesn't matter, the rigor does. Most men skip this because it stings to admit they snapped at their kid over spilled milk or dodged a tough call at work. But here's the twist. Seneca believed the unexamined day is the seed of regret. A surgeon doesn't ignore a tumor because it's uncomfortable to remove. He knows the cost of avoidance. Go deeper with a week in review. Every Sunday, carve out 30 minutes, no phones, no background noise. Replay key moments like a film critic. Was I the man I claimed to be when my coworker took credit for my idea? Did I choose courage or convenience when my friend needed hard truth? The Stoics didn't journal for nostalgia, they did it to spot patterns. Marcus Aurelius's Meditations was never meant for publication. It was a mirror he held up daily to check for weakness. But solitude isn't just about review, it's about rehearsal. Seneca spent hours in quiet conversation with his future self, anticipating challenges. Try this: sit in a parked car or empty park and script tomorrow's hardest interaction. Imagine your client rejects your pitch. Visualize your teen rolling their eyes at your advice. Now craft responses aligned with your values, not your temper. This isn't fantasy, it's cognitive inoculation. Navy SEAL use similar techniques before missions, and CEOs do it before boardrooms. The final layer: silent problem solving. Einstein famously theorized relativity while working as a patent clerk, letting his mind wander far from the noise of academia. The Stoics understood that breakthroughs don't come in meetings, they emerge in stillness. Next time you're stuck on a decision, ditch the brainstorming session. Walk alone for an hour with no podcast, no music, just the friction of your thoughts. You'll find solutions rising like sediment in a settled glass. Most men fear solitude because it reveals what distraction hides, the gap between who they are and who they pretend to be. But the Stoic doesn't run from that gap. He builds a bridge across it, one honest reflection at a time, because the man who knows himself truly can't be shaken by the world's chaos. True friendship in the Stoic tradition isn't about clinking glasses or trading favors. It's a sacred pact to sharpen each other's character. Imagine two swordsmiths hammering the same blade, alternating strikes to forge something stronger than either could create alone. That's the vision Seneca described when he wrote, "Friendship always benefits, love sometimes injures." While modern culture measures connections by follower counts and LinkedIn endorsements, the Stoics assessed bonds by a single standard. Does this person help me become more virtuous, or do they tempt me to compromise? Consider the contrast between Stoic friendship and today's networking mindset. A transactional relationship says, "What can you do for me?" A Stoic one asks, "What truth can we uncover together?" When Cato the Younger formed alliances in Rome's Senate, he didn't seek allies who'd blindly support him. He sought those who'd challenge his blind spots. His closest friend, Marcus Favonius, publicly rebuked him for a tactical error during a key vote. Instead of resentment, Cato thanked him, calling the criticism a greater gift than any applause. Compare that to the echo chambers of social media, where likes and shares reward conformity, not courage. The Stoics also warned against friendships rooted in vice: the drinking buddy who eggs you on to self-destruction, the colleague who normalizes cutting corners. Musonius Rufus taught that bad company is like a plague. You may not see the infection, but you'll feel its effects. Modern research confirms this. A Harvard study tracking lifestyle changes found that participants were 57% more likely to gain weight if their close friends became obese. Influence works silently, whether you're aware of it or not. So how do you cultivate Stoic friendships today? Start by auditing your inner circle, not with judgment but clarity. Ask, after spending time with this person, do I feel more focused or more distracted? More accountable or more complacent? Epictetus advised, "Tell me who you admire, and I'll tell you who you are." Surround yourself with those who embody the traits you aspire to, not just success but integrity, the entrepreneur who shares his failures as freely as his wins. The father who parents with patience you wish to emulate. Depth trumps frequency. Marcus Aurelius maintained lifelong bonds with his teacher Rusticus and his brother by adoption. Lucius Verus, relationships built on shared study and mutual growth, not convenience. In an age of group chats and viral challenges, prioritize one-on-one conversations where silence isn't awkward but meaningful. Try a Stoic exercise. Next time you meet a friend, discuss not the news or sports, but a recent challenge where you struggled to act virtuously. Vulnerability begets growth, the litmus test of a Stoic friendship. It survives and thrives in truth. When Seneca's friend Lucilius wavered between writing poetry and philosophy, Seneca didn't offer hollow praise. He wrote, "You're capable of better work. Don't waste your gifts on trivialities. Real friends risk your temporary displeasure for your lasting improvement." Because in the end, the highest compliment a Stoic can give isn't "I like you," it's "you make me better." Desire isn't the enemy, misplaced desire is. Epictetus, the Stoic slave-turned-teacher, drew a razor-sharp line between natural wants, food, shelter, purpose, and unnatural ones, fame, luxury, endless pleasure. He didn't preach austerity for its own sake. He warned that conflating these two categories chains men to endless dissatisfaction. Think of it like thirst. Drinking when you're dehydrated sustains life. Chugging seawater in pursuit of relief. That's how modern desires like porn addiction or status chasing backfire. They promise fulfillment but only deepen the ache. Take pornography. The ancient Stoics didn't face high-speed internet, but they understood the trap of artificial stimulation. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." Scroll through enough explicit content, and your brain rewires not just to need more extreme stimuli, but to see real intimacy as dull by comparison. It's not about moralizing, it's neurochemistry. A 2021 Cambridge study found that habitual porn users showed the same brain patterns as drug addicts craving a hit. Epictetus would nod knowingly. Freedom isn't achieved by satisfying desire, but by destroying it. Not all desire, just the ones that turn you into a puppet of your own dopamine. Status chasing reveals another layer. Social media transformed admiration into a slot machine. Every like and follower tickles the same itch as a gambler's jackpot. Seneca saw this coming 2 millennia ago when he mocked Rome's elite for painting their greetings flattering superiors while scrambling for invitations to the right parties. Today's version, buying luxury watches you can't afford to impress people you don't like. The Stoic antidote, the discipline of assent, pausing before acting on a want to ask, is this serving my character or my ego? When a former client of mine sold his Rolex to fund a welding certification, he didn't lose status, he gained sovereignty. The real test of mastering desire isn't denial but discernment. A Stoic doesn't avoid pleasure, he interrogates it. Is this meal fueling my body or numbing my stress? Is this purchase solving a problem or filling a void? Epictetus trained his students to practice voluntary discomfort, sleeping on the floor wearing threadbare cloaks, not to punish themselves but to prove they could enjoy comforts without being enslaved by them. Modern equivalent, delete your food delivery apps for a month, cook from scratch, you'll rediscover something shocking. Hunger, when met with patience, tastes better than instant gratification. Here's the breakthrough. Unnatural desires shrink when you starve them. Just as plants wilt without water, porn cravings fade when you redirect sexual energy toward real connection. Status anxiety loosens its grip when you measure yourself by internal standards, not linked in milestones. The Stoics didn't kill desire, they channeled it. Wanting less isn't deprivation, it's the space where true freedom grows, because the man who masters desire doesn't own more, he's owned by less. Anger has a bad reputation in Stoicism, but not for the reason you might think. The Stoics didn't reject anger because it's uncomfortable, they feared its reckless waste. Seneca called it temporary madness, not to dismiss its power but to warn against surrendering to it. Picture a forest fire, uncontrolled, it destroys everything in its path. Channeled into a forge, it tempers steel. That's the Stoic pivot, using anger's heat not to burn bridges but to build them. When Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The obstacle becomes the way," he wasn't preaching passive acceptance. he was offering a blueprint for turning outrage into action. Take the story of Frederick Douglass, the enslaved man who transformed his fury into abolitionist fire. Beaten, starved, and denied literacy, Douglass could have let rage consume him. Instead, he weaponized it. Every lash became a reason to teach himself to read. Every injustice fueled his speeches that would shake a nation. "I prayed for 20 years and received no answer until I prayed with my legs," he said. That's stoic anger in motion, recognizing fury as a signal, not a sentence. When your boss underpays you or a policy exploits the vulnerable, anger isn't the problem. Letting it fester or explode is. The solution: redirect its energy like Douglass did, into skill building, organizing, or creating alternatives. Modern workplaces reveal this daily. A junior developer discovers his idea was stolen by a senior colleague. The amateur seethes silently or fires off a career-ending email. The stoic, he documents the theft, uses it as leverage in his next performance review, then starts building a public portfolio no one can plagiarize. Anger pointed inward becomes depression. Anger unleashed becomes collateral damage. Anger focused becomes momentum. Marcus Aurelius faced betrayals from generals and senators, but his journals reveal no rants, just cold assessments like they did what seemed right to them. Now I'll do what's right for me. Activists embody this best. Greta Thunberg didn't just cry about climate change. She turned her frustration into Fridays for Future. When critics mocked her Asperger's, she reframed it. Being different is a superpower. Stoics would have applauded her antifragility, the ability to grow stronger under pressure. Apply this to personal injustices. If you're passed over for a promotion, don't sulk, calculate. Use the slight as fuel to network, upskill, or launch a side hustle. Anger is gasoline, strategy is the engine, but here's the nuance Stoics understood. Not all anger deserves dignity. Road rage over a missed turn, petty ego. Fury at systemic corruption, righteous fuel. Epictetus offered a litmus test. Does this align with what's within my control? A traffic jam isn't oppression, wage theft is. Channel fury where it can forge change, not just noise. When Cato the Younger saw Caesar's corruption, he didn't throw speeches, he filibustered for hours, using Senate rules as his weapon. His anger wasn't hot, it was cold, precise, and impossible to ignore. The final transformation, anger as gratitude in disguise. Every time injustice sparks your pulse, it's revealing a value you hold sacred. A Stoic doesn't curse the dark, he lights a candle then builds a lighthouse, because the man who masters his anger doesn't lack fire, he just knows how to weld with it. Death awareness isn't morbid, it's the ultimate lens for clarity. The Stoic practice of Memento Mori, remembering you must die, wasn't about fear, it was about focus. Picture a Navy SEAL in Hell Week, submerged in freezing water until his muscles scream. What keeps him from quitting isn't brute strength, but the visceral knowledge that this pain is finite. His instructors hammer it home, one day you'll be dead. So what will you do with this breath, this hour, this chance? That's the secret. When mortality stares you down, trivial distractions fade. The petty argument, the procrastinated project, the half-lived life, none survive contact with the stark truth that time is the one currency you can't earn back. Marcus Aurelius wrote his meditations not as an emperor but as a dying man. Plague ravaged Rome, war loomed, and his own health faltered. Yet his journals reveal no despair, just razor-sharp priorities. You could leave life right now, he reminded himself. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Modern psychology confirms this. A 2023 study in the Journal of Positive Psychology found that participants who visualized their own deaths reported 25% higher motivation to pursue meaningful goals versus superficial ones. The conclusion, contemplating the end doesn't paralyze, it propels. But death awareness isn't just for extremes like SEAL training or ancient battlefields. A tech CEO client of mine keeps a tombstone app on his phone. Every morning it generates a new epitaph. Here lies John. He built a fortune but missed his son's first steps. Or here lies John. He feared failure and never launched his dream. Morbid, maybe, effective, undeniably. It's why Steve Jobs told Stanford graduates, "Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life." When Jobs faced cancer, he didn't just fight the disease. He weaponized its lesson, revolutionizing 3 industries before his final breath. The Stoics took this further with negative visualization, a drill seal now called immune to surprise. Before sleep, vividly imagine losing your career, your health, your loved ones, not to dwell but to disarm fear's grip. When entrepreneur Tim Ferriss nearly succumbed to suicidal depression, he asked himself, "If I end it now, what joys, what breakthroughs, what loves will I never experience?" That question didn't just save him, it launched his career, because here's the paradox: embracing mortality doesn't shrink your life, it expands it. The man who knows his days are numbered stops chasing approval and starts building legacies. Practical application: start small. Keep a coin engraved with Memento Mori in your pocket. When you're tempted to gossip or scroll mindlessly, feel its weight. Ask, "Is this how I'd spend my final hour?" Next, write your own eulogy, not the flattering version for the funeral, but the raw truth you'd confess to your mirror. What gaps stare back? Finally, borrow a SEAL tactic, the 5-year test. Before reacting to insults or setbacks, ask, "Will this matter in 5 years?" Most don't. The stakes sharpen fast when death holds the stopwatch. Because here's the truth most men ignore until it's too late. Procrastination isn't laziness, it's denial of death. The Stoics didn't fixate on the end to depress themselves, but to electrify their present. Your last heartbeat could come in 80 years or 80 minutes. The only sane response: live like every choice etches your epitaph, because it does. Your body doesn't just move, it communicates. The statues of Stoic philosophers didn't freeze their posture for art's sake. They encoded a language of power without arrogance, calm without passivity. Take Marcus Aurelius's equestrian statue in Rome. Shoulders squared but not stiff, spine erect yet relaxed, hands resting lightly on the reins. Every inch telegraphs control, not the clenched fists of a tyrant, but the effortless command of a man who knows his strength doesn't need proving. Modern science confirms what the ancients intuited. Harvard research on power poses shows that standing like Marcus for just 2 minutes spikes testosterone by 20% and drops cortisol by 25%. Your physiology doesn't just reflect confidence, it creates it. But Stoic posture isn't about dominance, it's about presence. Contrast 2 men in a boardroom argument. One leans forward, jabbing his finger, his neck tendons taut. The other sits back slightly, palms open on the table, exhaling slowly through his nose. Who commands the room? The first man screams insecurity through his body. The second radiates unshakable ground. Epictetus, despite his slaves' limp, trained his students to stand like oaks in a storm, roots deep, branches flexible. You can practice this today. Before a difficult conversation, plant your feet shoulder-width apart. Roll your shoulders back, imagine squeezing a pencil between your shoulder blades, and let your hands hang loosely. This isn't theater, it's biofeedback. Your brain reads your stance and adjusts your emotions accordingly. The eyes matter most. Roman busts of Stoics like Seneca show heavy-lidded gazes, not the blank stare of detachment, but the focused attention of a hawk circling calmly. Blink too fast and you signal anxiety. Hold eye contact too long and it becomes a challenge. The Stoic rhythm, steady, slow blinks about every 5 seconds, with brief glances away to avoid intensity. When Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon, he didn't stare down his soldiers to intimidate. He met their eyes just long enough to show resolve, then shifted his gaze to the horizon. That slight lift of the chin, that quiet scan of the distance, it whispers, "I'm here, but my vision is beyond this moment." Hands reveal more than words. Statues of Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, often show one hand slightly extended, palm up, a gesture that says I'm open to reason without surrendering authority. Clenched fists invite conflict, flailing hands suggest panic. The Stoic middle ground, keep gestures between waist and chest height, fingers relaxed. When Cotto debated in the Senate, observers noted he rarely raised his voice, but his hands carved the air like a sculptor shaping truth. Modern equivalent: next time you're challenged, resist the urge to point or cross your arms. Instead, mirror a listener's gestures at half speed. If they lean in, you lean in slightly after a pause. This isn't mimicry, it's rhythmic engagement that diffuses tension while holding ground. The final test is the walk. Roman historians described Cotto's gait as deliberate but unhurried, each step a refusal to be rushed or rattled. Compare that to the modern hustle, the hurried shuffle of a man late for a meeting, or the aggressive stride of someone chasing validation. A Stoic walk says, I own this space and time answers to me. Try this drill. Walk 20 paces where each step takes exactly 1 second. Count 1 Mississippi silently. Notice how your breathing deepens, your periphery expands. Military drill instructors use similar techniques not just for discipline, but to instill what Stoics called gravitas, weightiness of character. Because here's the secret the statues don't show: Stoic body language isn't a mask you wear. It's the outer ripple of an inner stillness. When your stance aligns with your principles, you don't just appear confident. You become unshakable. The next time chaos erupts, don't just master your mind. Let your body teach you how to stand firm. Pragmatic optimism isn't about wearing rose-colored glasses. It's about seeing the world clearly and still choosing to act. Seneca, exiled to the barren rocks of Corsica by Emperor Claudius, didn't waste time cursing his fate or dreaming of rescue. He wrote letters to his mother explaining how the island's harsh beauty sharpened his mind, how isolation distilled his philosophy into something purer. The man who adapts to his circumstances, he noted, turns even exile into a homeland. That's the Stoic balance, acknowledging reality without surrendering to despair. Today, this might mean facing climate change head-on, not with apocalyptic panic, but with the quiet determination of an engineer retrofitting homes for energy efficiency, or a parent teaching their child to plant trees they'll never sit under. Modern culture often treats optimism and realism as opposites. Either you're a naive cheerleader or a jaded cynic. The Stoics rejected that false choice. Consider a father raising a teenager in an age of social media algorithms designed to exploit insecurity. He doesn't pretend the digital world is harmless, nor does he confiscate phones in defeat. He stages deliberate experiments. Let's track how you feel after 30 minutes of scrolling versus 30 minutes of baking bread together. Data replaces dogma. That's pragmatic optimism, arming someone with tools to navigate darkness, not denying the dark exists. Seneca practiced this daily, writing, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." He wasn't dismissing threats, he was defanging the stories we tell about them. The key lies in what psychologists now call agency priming, the belief that your actions matter even if outcomes aren't guaranteed. When Musonius Rufus taught philosophy in a war-torn Rome, he didn't promise his students safety or success. He promised something better: whatever happens, you'll meet it with competence. Modern parallels abound. A startup founder launching a sustainability app knows she can't single-handedly reverse emissions, but she can create ripples. A teacher in an underfunded school doesn't expect every student to ace exams. He focuses on the spark of curiosity that might outlast systemic neglect. Stoic hope isn't wishful, it's directional. There's a reason Seneca's exile writings resonate with modern prisoners of war and cancer survivors alike. Both face brutal realities, yet find freedom in what Viktor Frankl called the last of human freedoms: choosing one's attitude. A climate scientist battling policy gridlock channels this when she shifts from "no one's listening" to "what if this next paper reaches the right eyes." A parent guiding a child through bullying doesn't promise the torment will stop. He teaches how to armor the mind so cruelty loses its sting. Pragmatic optimism isn't about winning every battle, it's about fighting the ones that refine your character. The ultimate test: love what you can't control. Marcus Aurelius loved Rome even as it crumbled under plague and corruption. He didn't fantasize about a perfect empire, he served the broken one with clear-eyed devotion. Today, this might look like mentoring a troubled kid who may never thank you, or volunteering for a cause that outlives your lifespan. The Stoic doesn't need guarantees to act, he finds meaning in the act itself. Because real hope isn't the belief that things will improve, it's the certainty that your efforts matter regardless, and that's a flame no exile, no crisis, no algorithm can extinguish. Legacy is the shadow your character casts across time, not the spotlight you stand in today. The Stoics measured men not by the noise they made, but by the foundations they laid. Take Zeno of Citium, who transformed his bankruptcy into the birth of Stoicism by teaching under the Athenian Stoa Poikile. No paid courses, no book deals, just wisdom freely given to any who'd listen. His classroom was a colonnade, his payment the shaping of minds that would outlast empires. Compare that to today's influencer economy, where value is measured in viral moments and blue-check validations. The Stoics would ask a devastating question. When your last tweet fades and your follower count zeroes out, what markers will remain to prove you walked this earth? Marcus Aurelius left us no statues of his military victories, just a battered journal never meant for publication. Yet Meditations has outlived Rome's marble monuments, guiding warriors and CEOs alike because he wrote not for applause but for self-correction. Modern parallel: the software engineer who open sources code that powers hospitals instead of chasing Silicon Valley clout. Or the blue-collar worker anonymously funding a niece's education while his peers lease luxury cars to flex on Instagram. Legacy whispers where ego screams. The test isn't complexity but endurance. Cleans hauled water by night to fund his philosophical studies by day, literal sweat equity invested in wisdom. Today, that might look like the teacher who spends weekends tutoring struggling students off the books, or the entrepreneur reinvesting profits into trade scholarships rather than personal branding. Small, consistent acts compound. Seneca wrote, "A noble mind is satisfied with acting well without witness." The cafeteria worker who remembers every student's name plants deeper roots than the CEO who demands named buildings. So how do you audit your footprint? First, flip the resume test. Instead of listing what you've gained, titles, wealth, catalog what you've given, skills taught, burdens lifted, doors held open. Second, practice reverse legacy. Project forward to your great-grandchildren's era. What stories might survive about you? Not the curated LinkedIn posts, but the midnight hospital visits, the mentees who surpassed you, the standards you refused to lower. Finally, embrace anonymous giving, not for virtue signaling, but for sovereignty over your character. Pay a stranger's medical bill. Leave signed copies of Marcus's Meditations in prison libraries. Let goodness stand separate from your name. The ultimate Stoic challenge: build something that thrives without you. Like Cotto planting oak saplings he knew wouldn't shade him, or Epictetus tutoring students who'd teach generations unborn. Legacy isn't captured in trending topics, it's etched in lives altered, minds awakened, and silent acts that ripple outward long after the splash fades. Because the man who serves something greater than his reflection never truly dies. He just becomes part of the architecture of better men. These 20 Stoic skills aren't just a checklist, they're a blueprint for reclaiming virtuous masculinity in a world that's forgotten what it means to stand firm. Emotional mastery, discipline forged through discomfort, resilience that turns obstacles into fuel, purposeful action over empty motion. They all weave together into something greater. This isn't about becoming a statue unmoved by life's storms. It's about becoming the oak, roots deep enough to bend without breaking, branches strong enough to shelter others. From the way you carry yourself to the legacy you leave, these are the tools that transform reaction into command. But here's the truth: wisdom untested is just theory. So start small, pick one skill this week, just one. Maybe it's inserting that pause between anger and action, or waking 30 minutes earlier to journal like Marcus Aurelius. Perhaps it's auditing your spending to break consumerism's hold, or having the hard conversation you've been dodging. Progress doesn't demand perfection, it demands practice. And when you stumble, good, that's where growth lives. Share your journey in the comments, not for applause, but for accountability. The Stoics didn't train in isolation. They sharpened each other like swords in a forge. Epictetus, the slave who taught emperors, left us with words that cut to the core. First say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do. Not tomorrow, not when things calm down, now. Because the man you're becoming isn't built in grand declarations, he's forged in the daily, deliberate choice to act. The world needs fewer spectators and more men who lead by example. So tell me, what's your first move?